this episode, we begin a shift into the legal and ethical side of security management, starting with a topic that can feel intimidating at first, but becomes clearer when you treat it as a mapping problem: identifying legal jurisdictions and transborder data flow obligations. A jurisdiction is simply the area where a particular set of laws has authority, and in cybersecurity, that authority often follows the people, the organizations, the systems, and the data. Transborder data flow obligations are the rules and responsibilities that apply when data moves across national or regional boundaries, whether that movement is intentional, accidental, or just a side effect of how modern services operate. For brand new learners, the most important idea is that data does not travel in a legal vacuum. The same dataset can be subject to multiple jurisdictions at the same time, and the organization must understand which rules apply before it can design controls, contracts, and operational processes that are defensible. This lesson is not about memorizing specific laws. It is about learning how to identify where obligations come from and how to reason about cross-border data movement without guessing. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A practical way to start is to recognize that jurisdictions in cybersecurity are not only about where a company is headquartered. Jurisdictions can be determined by where the organization operates, where its employees work, where customers live, where systems are physically located, and where data is stored or processed. In some cases, the jurisdiction may be based on citizenship or residency of data subjects, meaning the individuals whose personal data is involved. In other cases, the jurisdiction may be based on where a transaction occurs, where a service is offered, or where a regulator has authority over an industry. This creates a common beginner confusion. People assume that if a server is in one country, only that country's laws apply. In reality, multiple legal obligations can apply simultaneously, especially when data relates to individuals in different regions or when services cross borders. Thinking clearly about jurisdiction means asking what connections exist between the data and different legal authorities. Those connections are what make compliance complex, but they also make it manageable when you map them systematically. To map jurisdiction, you need to define what data you are talking about and what the organization does with it, because obligations vary depending on data type and activity. Personal data generally creates stronger obligations than anonymous data, and sensitive categories of data often create stronger obligations than general contact data. Business data can also create obligations, especially when it relates to regulated industries, contractual commitments, or intellectual property. Activities matter too, because storing data, processing data, transferring data, and disclosing data can each trigger different requirements. For beginners, it helps to treat this as a set of questions. What data do we have? Who does it relate to? What do we do with it? And where does that happen? You do not need legal jargon to begin. You need accurate descriptions of data and flows. Once the facts are clear, the legal analysis becomes more grounded. Transborder data flows are often misunderstood because people imagine them as deliberate file transfers, like someone emailing a spreadsheet to another country. In modern environments, data can cross borders through routine system behavior, such as using a service that stores backups in multiple regions or uses global content delivery networks. Data can also cross borders when support staff access systems remotely from another country, or when a contractor analyzes logs from a different region. Even the act of routing network traffic can involve cross-border paths, depending on the architecture and service providers. A beginner-friendly way to see this is to think about a phone call. You might call someone across town, but the network that carries the call might route through distant infrastructure. Similarly, an organization might think its data is local, but the underlying services might replicate it globally unless controls and contracts restrict that behavior. Identifying obligations requires understanding these hidden flows, not only the obvious ones. One reason transborder obligations matter is that different jurisdictions define privacy, security, and lawful processing differently, and those differences can create tension. For example, one jurisdiction might require certain notices to individuals, while another might require certain retention or access provisions. Some jurisdictions limit the ability to transfer personal data outside their territory unless specific safeguards are in place. Others emphasize breach notification timing, meaning the organization must notify regulators and sometimes affected individuals within defined time windows. Even if we avoid naming specific laws here, the principle is that cross-border data movement can change which compliance requirements are triggered. That means the organization must understand where data is going and why, because you cannot design appropriate controls if you do not know which obligations apply. For security managers, this mapping is part of risk management, because legal noncompliance can create financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational restrictions. It can also create trust damage, because customers and partners often care deeply about where and how their data is handled. Another key concept is the difference between data location and data access, because both can trigger obligations. Data location is where data is stored or processed, such as in a data center or region. Data access is who can view or handle the data, which can be influenced by remote administration, support access, and cross-border teams. Some legal obligations focus on location, such as requiring certain data to remain within a country or region. Others focus on access, such as restricting who can view data or requiring certain protections when data is accessed from outside a region. A common beginner misunderstanding is thinking that if data stays in one place, there is no cross-border issue. If a support team in another country accesses that data, the organization may still face trans-border considerations. Security managers, therefore, need to consider both storage geography and access geography. A clear understanding of both helps the organization design controls like access restrictions, monitoring, and contractual terms that align with obligations. Contracts and vendors add another layer to jurisdiction and trans-border obligations, because many organizations rely on third parties to store, process, or transmit data. When a vendor provides services across multiple regions, the organization must understand where the vendor processes data, where the vendor's subcontractors operate, and what commitments the vendor makes about data residency. Contracts often include clauses about data location, confidentiality, breach notification, and subcontracting, and those clauses can either support compliance or undermine it if they are vague. For beginners, it helps to understand that outsourcing does not outsource responsibility. The organization remains accountable for how data is handled, even if a vendor performs the processing. This is why identifying jurisdictions and flows is not purely a legal task. It is also a security and governance task. If security leaders do not understand the real data flows, they cannot validate whether vendor commitments match operational reality. A practical approach to identifying jurisdictions and obligations is to build a mental map that includes three anchors: the data, the people, and the places. The data anchor includes what categories of data are involved and how sensitive they are. The people anchor includes who the data relates to, such as customers, employees, or patients, and where those people are located or considered resident. The places anchor includes where the systems are located, where processing occurs, and where access originates. Then you add the flow layer, which describes how data moves between places and who touches it along the way. This method helps prevent the common error of focusing only on one dimension, like server location, while ignoring who the data relates to or how it is accessed. It also helps identify mixed jurisdiction scenarios, such as a global workforce accessing a centralized system or a global customer base using a service hosted in a few regions. Once you have that map, you can identify which jurisdictions have plausible authority and then work with legal experts to confirm obligations. The key is that security managers should provide accurate facts and a clear flow picture, because that is what enables correct legal interpretation. Finally, once obligations are identified, the organization needs to translate them into operational expectations and controls, or else the identification effort becomes academic. If obligations require limits on cross-border transfers, that might translate into data residency controls, contractual restrictions, and monitoring of replication behaviors. If obligations require specific breach notifications, that might translate into incident response procedures that include jurisdiction-based notification workflows. If obligations require restrictions on access, that might translate into role-based access control, regional access rules, and logging that can prove who accessed what and from where. None of this requires the listener to become a lawyer. It requires understanding that legal obligations become security requirements when you operationalize them. For beginners, the takeaway is that compliance is not separate from security. Compliance shapes what secure behavior must look like in specific contexts, and security provides the mechanisms to make that behavior reliable and provable. Identifying legal jurisdictions and transborder data flow obligations is the foundation for building security and privacy controls that stand up to scrutiny in a connected world. Jurisdiction is about which legal authorities can claim relevance based on where people, organizations, systems, and data are connected, and transborder obligations are about what rules apply when data moves across boundaries or is accessed from outside a region. A disciplined approach begins with mapping data types, activities, locations, and access paths, including hidden flows created by modern services and vendors. It also recognizes that multiple jurisdictions can apply at once, and that both data location and data access can trigger obligations. When security managers provide clear facts and flow maps, legal interpretation becomes more accurate and operational controls become more targeted. By treating this as a structured mapping and translation problem, organizations reduce legal risk, strengthen trust, and design security programs that work across borders without relying on assumptions.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.